very interesting. But presumably one thing doesn't change. Tell me. So presumably you're a very empathic person.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the bit of story I haven't told you was that, before I became a social worker, I actually was a volunteer drug and alcohol counsellor. I trained first and foremost in psychotherapeutic counselling and did my, what in them days was the old VAX accreditation, which is what all the drug and alcohol services, there have been people in Wakada that had their VAX accreditation. That's what everyone did. It was a particular training scheme for the voluntary sector counsellors, for those that didn't step up to then doing their full diploma in counselling or BACP counselling, which I didn't do because I went into social work instead. But yeah, so everything, I suppose, has that much more basic, all of my practice underneath it has a much more basic, straightforward Rogerian approach, genuine person-centered, not the way it's used in social work, but something a bit more old-fashioned. But the other bit about it, of course, and this is where you can be different to a lot of people who work in the field, this is also still my community. These are still my mates. All the time I'm going through this journey, I'm still living and breathing amongst everyone else who's still taking lots of drugs. Some of my best friends, drug takers, have died and all that rest of it. There would have been any point in time in the evening if you'd have asked me, I wouldn't have chosen to go out on an evening social, with the colleagues, much more like we've done with the clients, because they're my folk. Yes.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So yeah, there is the empathetic nature of it, but there's also the fact that, yeah, this is the places where I want to be anyway. Yes. I think that's really important. I want to be. I'm not just employed there. I want to be there. I fought it, and Ian saw that I shouldn't fight it and persuaded me to get the job, and he was right. I did fight it very in the early days and thought, I'm not going to mix the two, but actually that's just rubbish. Yes.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought a great deal about that. Yeah, they were your folk. That's a really great way.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I can understand. That's a really good way of putting it. And you can understand, I mean, so many people at the time said to me they were going for help, and they would say to me, I am sitting there with someone who has no comprehension of where I'm at. They're a student, they're an ex-university student, all they've got is a textbook. They have no, and it's not, I mean, they might have had a little bit of empathy, but still they were in a different world and they'd never experienced this world.
And it mustn't be a pre-requirement. I'm really clear about this. It's plenty of people that can do really good drug and alcohol work without having been there. After all, when I went to, when I go to the doctor and I've got a particular problem with my testicles, I'm not really interested in what experience the doctors had with their own testicles. If they so quite clearly, if you're feeling a little bit depressed, you don't go to your GP and ask them whether or not they've spent any time in a psychiatric unit. So it's not a pre-requirement in any sense of the word, but it's clear in this field and arena. It's important to a lot of people. And I think what I learned, and you came back to me and said, what did I learn from Ian Wardle? There's got to be enough of it in the agency. There's got to be enough of a field, because that will mix and match in the cultural and I think that's the point. If there's enough of it in and around the agency, doesn't have to be 100%. If there's enough of it, it pervades, and that provides the confidence and reassurance. Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if I think back to my days at Wakada and actually my little visits to Leap in Edinburgh, think back to, so there I am, very naive, middle class, living on the Gower, nice house and everything. And I come into this place and I've not met people like this. And there must have been something I emanated that allowed me to connect with these people. But at the same time, that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the fact they already had trust with people like Dave Watkins, Keith Morgan, and the other people there. They had set a climate such that before I was in there, there were some other academics who were in there who had done a lot of damage. So already I was on a, that was a bit of a test and I was told that later on that this had happened. But I think I obviously showed something, passion or understanding, whatever, but I still wouldn't have got in if it hadn't have been that climate that had been set by other people. That's how I felt. That's interesting when you talk about that folk thing. There are some people who just emanate it, can't you? I mean, when I went into places, I could see it in you. There was something that you just register. And I guess a lot of the people who go for help, they see it as well. And, that's
really basic. Some of it's basic human stuff, but there is something else in all of it as well. We know that, Jess.
And it's not, you don't have to have been a user to,
I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult to run a drug or alcohol service if no one inside that service has got any of that direct experience. I just don't think enough of that.
I can't see how you do it. I cannot see how you do it.
People did.
But they probably weren't very successful.
Once upon a time, it would have been a criteria for excluding you from employment. You wouldn't have been able to be employed in certain drug and alcohol agencies if you had that past.
Well, and also, even when I was going around, you had to be clean for 2 years. I remember. Yeah, and I remember Phil Valentine talking with Michaela Jones in an interview about that. I mean, it'd be 2 years clean.
I love that. I love it. It's such a Mickey Mouse expression, though. Like so on day whatever it becomes. I can't do the maths that quickly, but day 742, I'm employable, but day 741, I'm not. How does that work? Yes,
No.
And you can get it wrong. You can get these things wrong. I remember employing a particular individual at Kais, and I'm not going to the whole story, but just to tell you that I got it wrong. This new member of staff arrived at the first team meeting and essentially was monged out during the team meeting on their prescription drugs. And I could see the rest of the team just looking at me going, Wulf, what have you done this time? Yes. And it took us 6 months to get rid of that person. And essentially both them and the GP had lied to us about, their relationship with their drugs. But, so you can get it wrong. Of course you can get it wrong. And there are reasons why you don't want that going on. Yes, because,
No, absolutely. But you can imagine someone who gets to day 730 or 729 and they're getting a little stress and they lapse. Sorry, mate, you've got to go back to square.
Yeah, back to the queue. Yeah, back to the queue.
Yeah. And of course, the whole process of recovery includes lapses. No, amazing.
Yeah. Crazy rule.